This is one of the most exciting meetings. I think it's all exciting, that's why I never tire of it. The body was designed to heal itself, and we have been establishing that. It just needs a little bit of help sometimes. And so this morning and this evening we're going to have a look at the things that you can do to the body to stimulate healing. A lady rang me this morning and said, "Barbara, I've scratched my eye and it's really red and it won't go down. What do I do?" And isn't it something that we often have a dilemma over? What do we do? What happens if we do nothing? Will it get bigger and bigger and bigger and get so infected my eye will fall out? Don't our minds sometimes do things like that? I've got to do something. And I know in Australia we call it casualty. I think you call it emergency here. The average wait is 8 hours. And you go in there, and if someone's having a heart attack, well, you know, that's what the nurses do and the doctors, they assess. This is critical, that one can wait, someone with a sore eye, that can wait. And if you knew these little bits and pieces to do, you could get relief very quickly and not even have to go into emergency. I always say, if you're unsure, yes, be checked out. And if the doctor says you've got to go on antibiotics immediately, you say, "Thank you for your advice," take the script and then go home and think, well, what can I do instead of that? And when I was just learning natural remedies, I did that several times with my children. And I would say, "Thank you for your advice." I would take the script, I would go home, but you know, I never had to get that script. I never had to do it because everything that I did brought relief. And if it brings relief, the body's saying, yes, we can do that. And so as we go through this morning, I'll also share with you what I advise this lady to do. So we're going to be looking at a few things, and the first one we're going to be looking at is the onion. This was the first poultice that I ever did. We're going to have a look at what you can do with cooked onion and what you can do with raw onion. My first daughter, I was only 24 I think at the time, she got an earache and everyone said, you got to take her to the doctor, she's got to go on antibiotics or she'll go deaf. So I rushed to the doctor through this. Is that right? Fear. I didn't want my daughter to go deaf. And put her on the antibiotics. I was a bit of a hippie, back to nature lifestyle, only just learning things like that, but I didn't know what to do when they got sick. And put her on the antibiotics. Within 24 hours everything had settled down. I think the antibiotics stopped in 5 days, earache came back. What do? I didn't know what to do. Back to the doctor. 6 weeks and 4 courses of antibiotics. Later, the earache comes back. What do? I was so frustrated. That's why if ever a mother contacts me, I say to Michael, I'm banned to give advice in Australia, but if a mother rings me, I will answer. And I won't tell her what to do. I will say, this is what we do at Misty Mountain Health Retreat. Because I know what it's like to have a problem, and what do? So I went back to the doctor. I didn't know what else to do. And as he's writing the 5th script, I said to him, will my daughter be on this for the rest of her life? I'm beginning to come to that conclusion. He was challenged by my question. So he gave me a referral to an ear, nose and throat specialist. The ear, nose and throat specialist looked in Emma's ears, in her mouth. She's 18 months by now. He said, the child's teething. Give her these drops to keep the eustachian tubes clear. No more earache. So 2 years later, my next child's about that age. She gets an earache. I don't tell anyone because I felt the pressure. But you've got to do something. So I went to the old lady next door. So by now I'm about 26, I think. She's about 86. I said, what did your mother do when you had an earache as a little girl? Because I know back in the old days they had little bits and pieces they did. She said, Mum would steam up an onion. on the stove. She'd cut it in half when it was soft, wrap it on the ear. So I went home. You steam it or dry bake. And then you cut it in half. And you cut it acrossways so that what you're looking at is the rings. This is a nice big onion. For a child, you might use a smaller onion. And you leave all the skin and everything intact because that holds it together. So you're looking at the rings. And then you get a cloth. It might be a tea towel. I think you call it a dishcloth. Because I was in a kitchen recently in Alabama, I said, we need a tea towel. And I realised no one knew what I was talking about. And I think you call it a dishcloth, yeah? What you dry dishes with?
Dish towel.
Dish towel? Yeah, we call it a tea towel. So you cover it over a few times. What have I got here? I just asked if anyone had an old sheet. You know, sheets that are getting very thin, starting to tear. They're perfect for poultices. Ideally cotton, they're thin. And then you just wait until it's the right temperature. And then put it on the ear. And then you might put a piece of plastic. What the plastic does is it insulates it, keeps it from chilling, protects the clothes. And then you bandage it on. And you can keep it there as long as you can keep it warm. So what I did with James, he was breastfeeding at the time. As he breastfed, the onion was against my arm, and then of course his ear, so I could feel the temperature. And when he was breastfeeding, I could do anything to him. And it must have brought him a lot of relief. The heat brings relief. The onion is a drawer. And he fell asleep. And what I did was I laid him down on a towel that had been folded up about 8 times. So I laid him so he was lying on the onion with all that toweling behind it, and I knew that would keep it warm. And he slept for 2 hours. What does that tell you? He's got relief. Because if they're in pain, they can't sleep. When he woke up, he was happy. He was happy for the rest of the day. And the next day, and the next day. And his father said to me, I'm suspicious. Take him to the doctor. I want those ears checked. Took him to the doctor. The ear that had been aching was as clear as a whistle. The other one had a bit of wax in it. I went home very, very happy. So no wonder I got into natural remedies. Just consider that. 6 weeks, 4 courses of antibiotics and a 2-hour onion poultice. Antibiotics, what's that doing to my daughter's gut? Her microorganisms in her gut. Now I know what to do. And so what I did was I got a little book, and it had A, B, C, D, E, F, G down the side, and E for earache, onion. I started my little book. And the full result of everything I discovered, I'm going to be sharing with you this morning. And there is a lecture online. It's a 50-minute lecture on poultices. So I'm going into a little bit more detail today because we have a little bit more time. I'd never used it on myself, but I've certainly used it on children, on grandchildren. But in early 2022, the only country I could fly to was England, United Kingdom. And I went to my adopted mother, who lives in Scotland, Ruth. She's in her 80s now. And I spent a few weeks with her. And I started to, I wanted to go to the island of Iona because I'd read about it in history books where Columba wrote out the New Testament. So I loved the history. And I stayed in the little town of Oban. I had a bit of a sore throat, which is not uncommon when you're travelling a lot. And because I continued to travel, it got worse and worse. And by the time I got to my little bed and breakfast where I was staying, the ache had gone right up to my ear, and my ear was throbbing. Here I am in a little coastal town in Scotland. I don't know anyone. What are my options? Find a doctor. What's the doctor going to do? Give antibiotics, which I really don't want. But I'm travelling. And then I had a bright idea. I'll go to a restaurant and ask them for a cooked onion. So I went into 2 little fast food places, And you just smile very nicely and say, excuse me, I'd just like to buy an onion. Oh, we don't do that. All our onions are chopped up. And I finally found a little restaurant. And I said to the young man, I said, I've got a very strange request. I said, I'm an Australian, I'm travelling, I've got an earache, I always did the cooked onion on my children. Would your chef agree to just steam me or dry bake an onion for me? I said, I'll pay. And he nodded. And he went back and he came out and he said, he'll do it. I said, I'll come back in half an hour. It'll take that long to get it soft. I came back and true, the onion was this big. It was huge. And what was very nice, he would take no money. I said, thank you so much. So what am I going to do? I'm in a little room. And this little room, it was in an attic. I thought it was a really good price, then I found out why. I'm only 5'2.5". There was only one point I could even stand in the room. It was right next to the bed. I'd hate to be 6 foot. And what am I going to do? So there was a little hand towel there, so I wrapped it in the hand towel, and because I had two, I thought I can do that here and here because I've got the sore throat and the earache. So I wrapped it up in a little hand towel. I hadn't used my trash can and it had a plastic lining, so I pulled that out. You know, necessity is the mother of invention. And then I put that over it because I knew I had to insulate it to keep it warm. And then I got another big thick towel and put that over it, and I laid down in bed. It was 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And I read and I dozed, and in and out of sleep I read and I dozed, and I kept it there for about 3 hours. And the pain came from, it was just about 10 out of 10, which is just your ears exploding. And the heat immediately brought me some relief. It did not take the pain all away, but it just brought it down. It brought it down to 8 out of 10. And after 3 hours with dozing a little bit, and you can't doze if you're in incredible pain, so it had brought, and because I'd insulated it so well, it kept warm for 3 hours. So at 6 o'clock, I thought, I think that's enough. My pain is now down to about 5 or 6 out of 10. You can handle that. So I got a cold cloth, because whenever you've got heat and you take it off, you must seal with a bit of cool. And I also, I have to tell you, I could not eat because I could not open my mouth. And when I put anything in, I could not swallow. I could not even drink water. So when I took the poultice off, I had a hot shower, finished with a quick cold. And it was really cheap. I had to go down the hall and find the bathroom, but there it was. And and I could drink. I could swallow. I could sip little bits of water, only a little bit. And I slept all night, praise God. And when I woke up in the morning, and this is the day I'm doing my big trip out to the island of Iona, I could swallow. I could drink. I could even eat. And the pain had come down to about a 3 out of 10. I tell you that because if someone takes a painkiller, within half an hour their pain's gone, is that right? But remember, pain is a knock. And when you take a drug, it just silences the knock. It's not fixing anything. So pain has a purpose, and it's giving you a message. So what this did was this brought my pain down to bearable. And remember what sleep does? Sleep is your healer. So I think by 8 o'clock I was asleep. So I had a good about 10 hours sleep that night. Sleep is your healer. I think when you sleep, it's like you're putting your body on nature's operating table. And I was able to go on my trip to Iona. I was so happy. Because imagine being in that situation, knowing no one, in a totally strange country, and you're in incredible pain. And I know if I just go and get a painkiller, when that wears off, guess what? The pain's there again. The body gives you signals. So what you're always looking at is symptoms. And it is true that medicine treats symptoms, but it just usually silences the symptoms. But when you use natural remedies, you go straight to the symptoms because the symptoms are telling you, I've got a problem here. And then you try different things and you're looking at the response. So I was able to go on my tour to the island of Iona. You go on a boat. I wrapped a big scarf around my head. I wasn't going to let my ear chill. But through the day it was just sitting at 2, 3 out of 10. The sore throat had gone right down to about a 2 or 3 out of 10. And on the little island of Iona, there's hardly anything there, but there's a real old stone Scottish pub, and by now it's lunchtime. And I needed water, so I was going to go and buy some water, and then I saw a sign that said carrot soup. I thought, yes, very nice for the throat. And the lady kindly filled up my water bottle. When I got back, now what you got to do now, you got to tell those people in the restaurant because they were so kind what they did to me. So I decided to go there to have my tea or my supper because they had soup, and soup very nice on the throat. I didn't see the waiter that had helped me, and just when I'm about to go, I saw him. He just came on duty. So I went and I said, and I smiled. He said, "Did you go to Iona?" I said, "Yes, because of the onion poultice." I said, I had that onion poultice on for 3 hours and it just brought the pain right down. You see, what's happened now is I've given testimony to that young man. Now, he'll tell everyone in the restaurant, because they've never had a lady from Australia come in and ask for an onion, and the chef that cooked the onion. Can you see, this is the best way to spread the word out. So a cooked onion poultice is best for an earache. What happens if the next day my earache came back? What do? I just do the onion again. And if it comes back every day for 7 days, what do? Just do the onion again. And it eventually will go. That didn't happen to me, but I've known it to happen to some people, and when I investigate, I look at their history, because the history tells you a lot. And this lady that it happened to, she had earaches as a child. She used to swim and always get earaches, and they ate a lot of dairy, which mucus builds up in the eustachian tubes. So she had a history of a lot of problems with her ears, and now she's a lady in her 40s, and it's almost as if the ears have to go through this to get a cleansing because of what happened way back there. And on the 7th day she woke up and her earache did not come back. Can you see what you're doing? It's very, very important to listen to the body. Get into the habit of listening. When you listen, you hear the symptoms. When you listen, you are mindful of the response, because that's your guide. That's your guide. You can also use the cooked onion poultice for a boil. It's very effective for a boil. A lady told me that she had a boil on her back, and her friend knew about this. And so she steamed up the onion. She waited till it was the right temperature. She didn't put it in a cloth or anything, and about this size is good, because if you're doing a boil, say the boil is about this big, you want it bigger than what it is. And what it'll do is, because it's a drawer and because of the heat, it'll pull everything up to a peak, and because of the moistness and the heat, it'll open the top. And often with a boil, you might leave it on there 12 hours. Feels good, leave it. Starts to feel a bit itchy, take it off. And what we have found is when you take it off, everything comes out. And people that regularly get boils have told me that when they started doing the onion poultice, they said it reduced the pain by easily 60%. It reduced the duration of suffering with the boil by easily 60%. Now that's quite impressive, isn't it? One man said to me, he lives in Queensland. In Queensland in Australia, that's up the top of Australia, that's like our tropics, that's where all the mango trees are. And he said as a kid, when the mango trees are on, they'd sit in the mango tree half the day, eating mangoes after mangoes, and he said they'd all get boils. I don't know whether the high fruit diet put their body into a little bit of a cleanse, or whether the high sugar just fed it a bit, but anyway, he said, I would have liked to have known about onion poultices then. They're very painful boils, and what the pain is the pressure. from underneath of this boil coming up. So if you put a cooked onion on that, it draws it all to a head, it softens the head, so whereas someone might suffer from a boil for a few days, this can actually resolve it and bring relief and resolve it in a matter of hours. What I have since learnt is that when you steam an onion and it's hot, you can squeeze some of that cooked onion juice into a spoon. Now it'll be boiling and the spoon will be cold. So when the boiling juice hits the cold spoon, it just comes to a nice temperature, and that can be poured into the ear. And then you wrap this up and put it on the ear. I didn't have spoons or anything in my situation. I just wanted that onion on my ear as quickly as possible. I wonder what the cleaners thought the next day when they were cleaning up the towels and they all smelled like onion. So that's what you do with cooked onion for an earache and for a boil. Now we're going to have a look at raw onion. And there's a few things you can do with the raw onion. A little baby that's got a cold, it's difficult to do much to a little baby. But what you can do, you can slice up an onion on a plate and you can put that plate near the baby's bed and the baby will be breathing in the onion fumes. And that can help clear the airways. What happens to you when you cut up an onion? You start crying, is that right? That's because that onion juice is very effective at thinning and clearing the mucous membranes. So there's a couple of places that we're going to use the onion, and one is for a sore throat. For a sore throat, you finely slice the onion, and the finer the slices the better, because if it's finely sliced it's not as lumpy. And you take your cloth, so when you've got an old sheet, this is a really good size to tear up to make your poultice cloths. And if you did it with paper, the paper starts to break. But if you do it with cloth, it won't. So what I used to do with the children on a rainy day, and we get the old sheets out and they start ripping up all the old sheets and then fold them up neatly, and we'd have a whole pile in our poultice box. It's good to buy a little box and make it your poultice box, so that when a crisis comes, you've got everything on hand. If you don't have any old sheets, you can go to the thrift store. I know in one town I was doing meetings and no one had any old sheets, so went to the thrift store and I found some old pillowcases that were quite thin. So I'd feel them. You want cotton, you want a natural fibre, you want it nice and thin. So Jamie asked me if this knife is okay. I said fine, but I think it is a little blunt, but anyway, we're getting there. If you've got a nice fine sharp, you can get them really fine. So you can see I've just sliced up the onion like this, and I'm going to turn it over, top and bottom. So now I've got a long poultice, like so. And then the area with one piece of cloth is what I put on my neck. So the onion is really just around the throat, where the sore throat is. And then you might put a bit of plastic wrap on that and a scarf, or you might just put a woolly scarf around it and sleep with that all night. And that can just take the edge off a sore throat. The ladies, your husband might not like your perfume that night, but it brings a lot of relief. Another thing that you can do, and we use onion mostly to clear respiratory. You can chop up an onion, and I did this for a couple of nights. I mentioned when I was in Germany I had a cold, and I did this a couple of nights, and it has a big difference. Now I'm going to ask Jamie if you could come up, and we're going to pretend that Jamie's hand is a foot, and I'm going to show you how you can put it on the foot, because what we're going to do is we're going to put this, the foot straight onto this chopped onion. And this is a poultice you wear overnight. So what I did was I just got a cotton sock and I put it all in the cotton sock and put it on, and then I put plastic over that, then I put a woolen sock on. But I haven't got any socks here, so or you can just use a cloth. So we're going to pretend that Jamie's hand is a foot, and so the hand goes straight onto the onion. And you spread it out to make sure that it's covering every bit, and then you cover that over, and then you get a plastic bag. Just come with me. And what the plastic bag does, thank you, plastic bag just keeps it all in place, and the plastic bag also protects the sheets from smelling like onions. And then you just twist that round and round, put it round the ankle, and then you put a sock on, and the sock will hold it all in place. And what that does, of course you do it to both feet, what that does is the biggest pores on the whole of your feet, from the whole of your body, are on the soles of your feet. And so the pores on the bottom of your feet take up that onion juice, your foot's straight on the chopped onion, and it clears the chest, it clears respiratory, but it's particularly good. We'll just put it over here. Thanks. You're right. Yep. Got it all. Thank you. And then in the morning, just throw the whole thing in the bin. Well, I had a sock on, so I didn't throw the sock in the bin. I just pulled it out. Thank you. So that's a real easy one. And I'll tell you a couple of stories to illustrate what it does. I was at my daughter's house, and her little boy was 3, and he had a cold. And we gave him a hot bath, and I'm going to show you how to make onion syrup in a minute. We gave him some onion syrup, and we put him to bed, and he coughed, and he coughed, and he coughed. And we thought he'll sleep in a minute. But after he just coughed and coughed for half an hour, we got him up, we chopped up the onion, we wrapped it on the bottom of his foot, put the sock on, put the plastic bag, then another sock on top, put him back to bed. Not one cough all night. You almost have to do it to believe how effective it is. And then a girlfriend of mine who knew about this, she said, I was camping, because in Australia we've got a lot of lovely coastal beaches. And she was camping by the beach, and the lady in the tent near her coughed all night long. So in the afternoon, my friend went to her and she said, I noticed you've got a cold. And the lady said, I'm so sorry, I'm probably keeping the whole camp, side awake with my coughing. And my friend said, do you mind if I try something? She said, anything. And of course, when you're camping, you've always got some plastic bags. You've always got some socks. Always got some onions. And so she made her the poultice for the bottom of the feet, told her what to do. No cough the whole night. Not one cough. And what's interesting, you don't even know if this lady's drinking enough water. You don't even know if because if you have a large evening meal and you got a cold, that can just about guarantee you're going to cough all night. So that's another important point. If you've got a cold, go to bed. If you're hungry and it's 6 or 7 at night, have a bowl of soup, or just eat an orange, just something very light. But if you have anything heavy at night, that'll intensify the coughing. But she didn't cough the whole night. So it's a very simple and yet a very powerful one. We've done it many times. And the cold that I had in Germany last week, I certainly felt it. What happened, it was right in the middle of this cold that I had. And of course the problem was I was lecturing every day, so it hung on a bit longer than it should have. That I woke up in the morning and my night dress, the sheets were wet. So the onion on the bottom of the feet, not only had it cleared my head, but it had put me into a bit of a fever. And as you'll see tonight, fever is a wonderful thing. If you get a fever in the middle of a cold, I can guarantee you'll heal a lot quicker, because fever has a purpose, as we will see tonight. So I washed everything and I felt very good. It almost seemed to be the turning point of my cold. So something else you can do with raw onion is make an onion syrup. We couldn't find a jar. We usually do a jar, so we're going to do a glass bowl. And remember, onion is a drawer. So if you use half an onion, never wrap the other half in plastic and put it in the fridge, because that half onion is going to absorb all the chemicals out of the plastic. So what do? Well, I think I mentioned earlier in the week, it seems a long time ago, Monday, doesn't it? That my husband, I make vegetables for him every morning. So if I've only got big onions, I'll just use a quarter of an onion. I'll chop it all up, I'll put it into a glass jar with a metal lid, and I'll put it in the freezer. And then I can just pull out a bit of frozen onion for the next few mornings. So never put plastic on a cut onion, because the onion will just absorb the chemicals. So I've got about half an inch there. Let's have a look and see what's going on here. I think you pull it up, do you? And then you put approximately a teaspoon of honey over that, and then you put another layer of onion. And so what you do is you layer the onion and the honey until you've filled your jar or used up all your onion. And you let this sit for approximately 24 hours. And after 24 hours, you strain the onion out. Now, by the end of our class this morning, a syrup will already be forming. At the moment, what we've got is sticky, gooey honey. It's thick. But the syrup that forms is quite thin and runny, and it's like a golden colour. So when you see that syrup forming, that's your cough syrup. So I'm going to put all of this top layer is a bit thicker, but I'll just put a little bit more honey on top of all that. This is called the onion syrup. Now at a stretch, if you needed it, within an hour you've got some syrup forming. But ideally, you leave it for 24 hours, and then you strain the onion out of the honey, and it can stay in the fridge indefinitely. I was asked the question once, how long does it last? I said, it doesn't last long in my home. My children used to love it, now my grandchildren love it. So I'm doing probably a good 3 teaspoons on top here of the honey. So you can see that we have no syrup forming. All we've got is the thick, gooey honey and the onion. But by the end of our class this morning, there'll be a runny syrup forming. But again, you keep that for 24 hours. Now what I will do when our class finishes, I'll just put a little china plate on top of that.
Do you leave it at room temperature?
Yep, it can be left at room temperature.
And then once you strain it, you put it in the fridge?
Yep, you can put it in the fridge, but as we all know, honey doesn't go off. Now, because I'm cutting up onion, excuse me while I sing. Thank you. If you've got a cold, chop up an onion. And then you can leave it in the fridge. You probably don't even need to leave it in the fridge because, honey doesn't go off. And you've taken the onion out, which could potentially deteriorate. So that's what you do with onion. The next one we're going to look at is garlic. And I'm going to write up a recipe for the flu bomb. And the flu bomb is something that you can take if you have sinus, if you have a cold, if you have a sore throat, if you have bronchitis, pneumonia, any type of flu. You could almost call it the COVID bomb. So it's a flu bomb. It's for any type of respiratory. And the number one ingredient in the flu bomb is garlic. And I'm not going to put an amount on that because, and this is by the way, one dose, because some people can handle a nice big fat clove like that. Some people can only handle a little bit. If someone's got a tender stomach, they might have a bowl of soup before they have the flu bomb. So garlic, and it's crushed, or this grater that I have here, you can just grate it up on that grater. That does a nice grate. The second ingredient is ginger, and it is finely grated, and it's usually about a quarter of a teaspoon. The next two ingredients are, first one is eucalyptus oil. And eucalyptus oil, there's definitely amount here, 1 drop. One lady got this recipe and she said, I bought the eucalyptus oil but I can't use it. I said, why not? Well, it says not fit for human consumption. And I said, well, that's if you're drinking half a cup. We've got a bit of common sense there. Do you know, an old remedy, and an old lady, I was only in my 20s and she was in her 80s, she said, I was one of about 8 children, and if one of us got a cold, we all had to line up. Mum had put a few crystals of sugar on a spoon and a drop of eucalyptus oil, and we all had to have a dose. She said it was very effective. None of us got the cold. So it's just 1 drop of eucalyptus oil. If you don't have eucalyptus oil, you could use tea tree oil. The next ingredient is cayenne pepper. I'm not putting an amount on this. Some people can handle a shake. Some people can handle half a teaspoon. Occasionally you might find someone who can handle 1 teaspoon. I can't quite handle that. So these two, it's just whatever you can handle. The next 2 ingredients is the juice of a lemon and a teaspoon of honey. And believe me, even if you put 4 teaspoons of honey, it would not improve the flavour. And you put that with half a cup of hot water. As I mentioned, that's 1 dose. My children, when they were even 2 and 3, I would give them the flu bomb. So I'd only put a tiny bit of all of this in. But they would drink it, and the reason they drank it because they had experienced the relief that you get. What it does is it relieves the sore throat, it relieves the congestion in the head. And the dose is to have 1 3 times a day, and you might find by the 2nd or the 3rd day, there's no more cold. So you could call that your antibiotic drink if someone wants to classify it as something like that. So that's the flu bomb. What about a little baby? Well, of course you can't give that to a baby, but there is something you can do with garlic for a little baby. And that is to finely slice the garlic. Now I want you to notice very clearly what I said, finely slice. You must not grate and you must not crush, because if you grate or crush, too much juice comes out and it'll burn the baby's feet. You'll blister their feet. We don't want to do that. They'll heal, but you can't put garlic on it again for about a week. So can you see what I've done here? I've got a fine, a little length of cloth, and I've got 2 fine slices of garlic. And then, could I have your hand please, Jamie? And we're going to pretend Jamie's hand is her foot again. The garlic does not touch the feet. So this is a little foot. So I've folded it over again, as you can see. And then we're going to wrap it on the baby's foot.
How many layers of cotton in the foot?
1, only 1 layer between the foot. And then you put a little sock or a little bootie on, and you'll find within a few minutes you can smell it on the baby's breath, because the biggest pores in the whole of the body are on the bottom of the feet. And I have done this many times and I have never burnt a baby's foot. Thank you. But my sister, only 2 weeks ago, her little grandson, he was only about 6 months old, had a bad cold. So she decided to do a really good job and she crushed it. And she put it in the cloth and put the cloth between it. Within 20 minutes, the baby was screaming. They quickly pulled it and it had burnt the bottom of the feet. So I stress. Now I've got a new book that we're hoping is going to be out in the next month. We're hoping, called Sustain Me, and this book has all the natural remedies in it. And so when you read about the garlic on the feet, you'll find that I say it about 3 times. Finely slice it, don't crush it. And I've got some good news. I rang my daughter last night in Wisconsin, and while we're speaking, my book has been delivered to her house. And so that website I gave you, that's the Self-Heal by Design. They're unloading it as we speak. So if you contact www.mistymountain.USA, you can order the book.
How long do you leave that garlic post on the baby's feet?
You might leave it on overnight, you might leave it on for a few hours. My little son, James, when he was 3, he used to often get very chesty. So I used to wrap the garlic on the bottom of his feet, put his sock on and put his little shoe on and run out to play, and every step, what's happening? Squeezing a little bit more juice. See, having a fine slice just allows the juice to slowly, little by little bit, be released. Now at the end of the day, it was time for his bath. I take his shoe and sock off, and the slices of garlic, they looked like bits of dried out leather. There's not one drop of juice left in them. The body knows what to do. Remember Psalm 104 verse 14, God gave herbs for the service of man. That when that garlic juice goes into the blood, it goes right where it needs to go. It'll help to clear the head, it'll help to loosen the chest. And so it's a great way of getting garlic into little ones.
On that story of Peter the other day with his asthma, and you said you did hot and cold treatments on his chest.
Yeah.
Would the garlic have been helpful?
Well, I know that I'm guilty of information overload, but all these little things that I did were not helping Peter. And that's when I discovered Peter had severe physiological asthma. It would take the edge off, but it wouldn't do a lot. And this afternoon this evening, we're going to be looking at water treatments. And water treatments, nothing gets an effect as quickly as water treatments. And so usually with a child with a cold, this will have an effect. But with Peter's severe asthma, I had to go a little bit further with his. But this will certainly bring a little relief. But it's just with Peter I found it wasn't doing what it did with the children with just their usual colds. So that's what you can do with garlic. Garlic is high in sulphur. And so people that may have stomach ulcer or irritable bowel, they might find the garlic a little irritating when they take it internally. So they can use it. They could even wrap, for an adult, you could wrap 10 slices of garlic on the bottom of the feet. So that's one way to get the garlic in without irritating the lining of the gut. Or if they have a bowl of soup, they could crush the raw garlic into the hot soup, and that boiling water, very hot water in the soup, will just take the edge off the raw garlic, and eaten with the soup, they might find that will not irritate. So what I did a few weeks ago when I was in Germany, I would have a slice of sourdough bread for breakfast. I would put olive oil on the bread. I would put a whole crushed clove of garlic over the whole bread, then I would sprinkle cayenne pepper on it, then I would put avocado on it, and then I would put sliced tomato on the top. Very nice. So I called that my antibiotic sandwich. And I was drinking hot ginger tea, so I was actually doing all this, but probably I didn't have it in the drink, but I was taking all of those herbs through the day. So that's what you can do with garlic. And now we're going to have a look at ginger. And Ginger can be used internally and ginger can be used externally. It has been used for centuries to warm a person. So I'll give you an experience I had in Germany. It was a very hot day outside, so I dressed very lightly. And a man wanted me to talk to a lady who'd been sick on the phone. And the house I was in was all stone. And because it was hot outside, they hadn't lit the fire, and I got colder and colder, and I thought the phone call would be 20 minutes and it ended up being an hour. And by the end of the phone call, I was very, very cold. And I'd missed my ride to go out and get stamps for my postcards for all my grandchildren. So the man felt bad. He said, I'll drive you to the shop. But his car was air conditioning. See, Germans aren't used to this heat. So as soon as there's a little bit of heat, the air condition goes on. And we went to the shop and there was a huge line up and the air condition was on in the shop, and I got colder and colder. And by the time I got back to the house, I was shaking. I was so cold. And it was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and I thought I'll just jump into bed, but I was so cold I could not warm up. So I went out and there were a couple of ladies there, and I said, can you give me some hot water bottles and can you make me some ginger tea? Some hot ginger tea, because I knew that when I drank the hot ginger tea, I would start to warm up. And I did. The hot ginger tea and the hot water bottles in bed, I started to warm up. But what was interesting, my body took that opportunity to go the other way and create a fever. Anyway, the good news is I had a fever that night. I think I slept for 10 hours, and the staff were coming in very worried about me, and they said, look, you're supposed to fly in 2 days, you can stay. You can stay because you're not going to be able to fly. So this was, let's say this is Wednesday and I'm flying Friday. So this is Wednesday night. And they took my temperature and it was 40. So what's that? That's 100, 102, something like that. It didn't bother me, I was just so happy to be warm. But in the morning I was wet from the perspiration in the night. You know, when I wake up, I felt fantastic. Absolutely amazing. I had a big drink of water, I went outside and I ran up and down. Well, I didn't have to run up the big hills. I dived into the freezing cold water, got dressed and came back and had breakfast, and all the staff were saying, are you okay? I said, I'm fantastic. Do you know what Florence Nightingale said? Disease is a process of repair. And a cold is a house clean. And when you get a fever, it'll even boost it along. Tonight I'm going to go into detail on fevers. And you might be very surprised at what we look at. But the ginger is excellent for warming a body. And I'm sure here in the middle of winter, you have snow. When you have snow outside and maybe you're out there too long and you get cold, come in and have a hot ginger tea. And if you have a massage in Asia, when you come out of your massage, they always have a cup of hot ginger tea for you. Ginger is also an anti-nausea herb. And by the way, the easiest way to make a ginger tea is just to grate it on this little grater. Pour boiling water on it. That's all you need to do. And then after 10 minutes, you might strain it and drink that. Sometimes I even just put a few slices of ginger in my water bottle and have a nice ginger flavour. I do love ginger. So it can be used internally to warm up a body. It can be used internally for a sore throat, and we saw that. It's in the flu bomb. It can be used internally for nausea. So if you go to the health food shop and buy seasickness tablets, car sickness tablets, it's just compressed ginger. Because ginger is a very good anti-nausea herb. And ladies that are suffering from morning sickness can get, pregnancy, they can get relief by having ginger tea. Or one lady said she just walked around with a piece of ginger and kept having a little nibble and sucking on the juice. And she said that found it helped a lot. So that's where you can use it internally. It also will boost your hydrochloric acid. Remember earlier in the week when we looked at the liver and we looked at sweet bitters, and I called ginger the sweet bitter. And you can use it externally. So I'm going to show you how you can use it externally, and I'm going to show you how to make a ginger poultice. So I always fold over cling wrap a few times, then you've got something that's a little bit more sturdy and a little bit more usable, or you could cut up a stronger plastic bag. And I put that on the plate, and then I put the cloth on that. And I grate straight onto the cloth. And the reason I like grating on the cloth is because you haven't lost any of it. You grate on a plate and put it on the cloth, you've lost a bit there. And we're going to grate it with this little tiny grater. I never peel it. If it's dirty, I certainly wash it. But whenever I make a ginger poultice, you're often left with a few little bits on the side, stringy bits. I often put them in a cup and pour boiling water on it and make some ginger tea because it is one of my favourite teas. I think every home should have one of these graters. They're great. And when I'm cooking, I'll often just grate straight into the pot. I'll grate the ginger straight into the pot. I'll grate the garlic straight into the pot. They're very fine. So what I'm doing now is I'm making a ginger poultice, and we're going to pretend that Jamie has a very sore wrist. And maybe Jamie had an old injury on this. Now you see there's a little lump there. I'm taking that out because you don't want a big lump in your poultice. You want it to be nice and soft. So we're pretending that maybe 10 years ago Jamie came off her bicycle onto her wrist and has hurt her wrist. It's healed, but when the cold weather comes it may start to get a little bit sore. Now can you see, I'm not going to hold this up too much because I don't want it to all fall off, but you see I've just put it on the middle area of the cloth, and I'm going to make a package. So I say we fold over north and south and east and west to make the package. The beauty of making a package like this is that you can just throw it in the trash can when you finish. Can you see the juice coming out? So what I've got at the back is all the layers. So if you happen to do a little bit too much ginger and it's very wet, you've got a few layers that'll absorb that up. So what I've done here for Jamie's wrist is probably about a teaspoon. So the bit that goes on the skin is it's got just one layer. And so maybe Jamie fell and she gets a lot of pain at the bottom of her thumb. But also notice that I've got about 1/2 inch of plastic all the way around. And I lay that on Jamie's wrist, and I'm very careful to make sure that the plastic's covering the poultice, because if the juice comes out it can soil the clothes. If air gets to that poultice it can chill it. So that's the reason the plastic's there. And not much plastic is covering or touching your skin. Now for people that don't want to use any plastic, what did they do in the old days before plastic? They would use a woolen square. I like sewing, so whenever I'm making a woolen skirt, I'll often cut up squares from the bits and pieces, and I have them in my poultice box. Because if you didn't want plastic to touch you, you could then put a woolen square over and then put the plastic on that, because the woolen does keep the moisture in. And then you bandage that on. Might bandage between the thumb so it doesn't fall up. Bandage it on, not too tightly, and then clip that on. And I always say a prayer. I always say, Father in heaven, please bless this poultice and bring relief to Jamie's wrist. Now, thank you, a little bit of ginger juice there. And in the morning you just take it off and you just throw the whole thing in the bin. Now, if you didn't put it in a poultice, you could put it on there, but can you see bits would fall off? And there's nothing worse than having bits of potato or ginger all through the bed. It just makes it very easy. And if you don't make the poultice comfortable and easy to wear, the next day the person says, I don't want one of them again. I got ginger everywhere. Now, we had this girl working for us once. She was from Texas, and she worked with us for about 6 months, and she was the best worker. Everything got done fast, but she was a bit messy when it came to the poultices. She did them too quick, she didn't wrap them up well, and I saw a guest once with the poultice on her arm. She came down for lunch, and it hadn't been bandaged on properly, and bits of poultice were falling out, and bits of ginger were falling everywhere. That lady didn't want another poultice. So much as we love this girl, we decided to not put her on making poultices for the guests. So you've got to be neat. You've got to make sure that there's enough cloth so that it folds over in a nice package. Now what I do when I'm putting on a ginger poultice, where you would use the ginger poultice is for joint inflammation. So Amelia, my right-hand girl who worked with me for 5 years, we thought she'd be with us forever, but then she fell in love and got married. But she worked with me for 5 years. It was very nice. She used to, whenever she gave the lectures, she used to say, gingers for joint, gingers for joint. And that's a good way to remember. Ginger is for joint. It's for inflamed joints. So arthritic joints, for gout, for any inflammation in the joint. Now let's say Jamie's one of our guests at our retreat, and she says, this wrist pains me. So we put a ginger poultice on. But what I do is I put that poultice on about 6 o'clock at night after the steam. Steam saunas are in the afternoon. And the reason I put on at 6 o'clock at night is I'm watching. I'm listening. Because if there is inflammation in that joint, the skin will get very hot. And some guests have said to me, Barbara, it's burning, my skin is burning. And if they say that, I say, well, just take it off. What's that burning? It appears to be that the ginger pulls the inflammation out of the joint to the skin. And so when someone's saying it's burning, and I say, yeah, but how does the joint feel? And they usually go, oh, actually, I can move my joint. And some people, I'll say, how does it feel, say at 8 o'clock at night? Because if you've put it on at 6, if that skin is going to get the burning feeling, it'll happen within half an hour to an hour. And so at 8 o'clock I say, how does it feel? And the person says, it's just too hot. We'll just take it off because it's already done something. But some people say, oh, it feels so good. It feels so good. So we leave it on all night. So that's why I do it a few hours before bedtime, because you don't want to put it on someone, then they go to bed and then they wake up after an hour and their wrist's burning. So it will never burn your skin, it just feels like it. It seems to pull that inflammation out of the joint to the skin. But I'll tell you what happened to one lady. She saw my lecture on YouTube and she put it on her sore knee. Now sore knees, that's why I always look at the history. If someone says they've got a sore knee, what do? Did anything happen to that knee? Oh, well actually when I was a teenager I was skating and I had an accident. And what often happens is it's not so much the accident, it's just that after the accident the person doesn't give it the right conditions. After the accident, whenever it hurts, they take a painkiller. They're not listening. If you have an accident, you've got to baby that injury until it heals. And most people do the most damage after the injury by not listening. They take a painkiller and they keep walking, they keep running, they keep playing squash. That's when the damage is done. I was listening to I saw a documentary about this young boxer. He's a boxer, and his right hand was always his good hand. Anyway, unfortunately, he went to the pub and got drunk one night and got into a street fight, and they cut all his tendons and ligaments, and they had to stitch it. And his personal trainer worked on his arm, gave it all the right conditions did hot and cold treatments on it, rested it. There was no boxing. There's no boxing till that was totally healed. Now, after it had healed, this arm became even stronger. And I love that story because it's an illustration that if you have an injury and you handle it right, that injury can be even a stronger part of your body than before. That's why you have to listen. And if you don't listen to the first whisper, the body will start screaming, and when it starts screaming, it's doing damage. It's called mindfulness. You've heard of it? Whole books are written on this. Mindfulness. Listening. If the body says stop, stop. Put your leg up. What happens when you put your leg up? The knee eases. What's your body saying to you? Put your leg up, mate. Stop standing on your feet so much. What are your footwear like? Etc, etc, etc. You've got to investigate. So that arm was stronger after those severe injuries than before because it had been given the right conditions. So you first of all find out why the knee is sore. So this lady who watched my lectures, she had fallen over in a skating accident. And she hadn't really listened to the knee. She just kept going. She just took painkillers, kept going. And now it's 10 years later and that knee is giving her grief. So she put a ginger poultice on it. And she said she kept it on for a few hours, and when she took it off, she could bend a knee. She couldn't believe it. She was so excited. And the pain in her knee had reduced by easily 50%. She was so excited, she did that in the morning. She put another ginger poultice on all afternoon. Then she had a shower and she put another ginger poultice on all night. And when she woke up in the morning, the tissue on her knee was red, swollen with little blisters. She emailed me, she said, "What have I done?" I laughed. I said, "You've just overdone it. You've just overdone it." She was so excited about the results, she overdid it. And what do I mean by overdid it? She overdid it to the point where too much inflammation was being pulled out of her joint, and it did eventually blister her skin. She said, "What can I do now?" I said, put a nice soothing grated potato on it. You can't put ginger on it again for probably another 2 weeks. She just overdid it. So what would I have suggested in her case with her sore knee? I would have suggested do a ginger poultice maybe 2 or 3 hours in the afternoon, and then overnight, and we'll look at this in a minute, and you'll see as we go through this there are different poultices you can use for different things, and then put a castor oil compress on it overnight. So can you see sometimes you're combining your different poultices. So ginger's for joint. It's excellent for lower back pain. Now if someone has lower back pain, they'll often put a hot water bottle on it, is that right? And it brings relief. You know why? Because when you're in pain, the muscles come out in sympathy and they tighten. And you don't want them to tighten, you don't choose for them to tighten, it's just something the body naturally does when you're in pain. And so it brings relief because it softens those cramping muscles, because that's what heat does. But it actually is not helping your back, because if you put a hot water bottle on an inflamed joint, what's that going to do to the inflammation? It'll feed it. But if you make a ginger poultice and you put that on the lower back, and especially with us ladies who are curvy, when you put it on your lower back, lie on the bed and put your knees in the air so that your lower back goes flat against that poultice. Within half an hour, the heat will start coming out. So what you've done now is the gingers pull the inflammation out of the joint, and the heat is relaxing those tight muscles that are tightening because of the pain. So it's perfect for lower back pain. One lady put it on her lower back and it did nothing. It didn't get hot. I said, well, your lower back pain isn't due to inflammation. So often the amount of heat you feel on your skin is an indicator. Is it inflammation or is it something else? Yes?
Can you put this ginger poultice on a surgery that the incision's healed, but you're still healing inside?
The question is, can you put the ginger poultice on an incision from surgery that is still healing? I would not.
Well, I'm saying the incision is healed up,
Yeah.
like I've had shoulder surgery,
Oh, well, if it's joint,
but it's in the joint.
Yeah.
And can I still put that on?
you certainly can if it's in the joint, because remember, ginger's for joint. If it was soft tissue, I would not, but for joint you can. We're about to have a break, but before we have the break, I'm going to make a castor oil compress. And I want to do that now because it takes a while to soak through. So we're going to have a break, and after the break it will have soaked through. Notice how many layers I've got on this poultice. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, something like that. Because the thicker your compress for the castor oil, the more oil it can hold, and then the more oil it can go into you. So I'm going to put the castor oil on. I'm going to show you how I put it on, and then we'll have a break. I can't hold it up, so in the break you can come and have a look. Because castor oil is very thick, and it's just going to sit on top. And it takes about 15 minutes to soak through. So I'm just going to sit it there, and then you don't touch it. So what I've done with this poultice, well, it's a compress really, because you can keep reusing it. After the break we'll look at it a bit more. There's the compress, and I think I counted about 15 layers, and I only put the castor oil on about there. And it's a thick bubble. And when it soaks through, it's going to go through about that much. And when it goes on our hot body, it'll thin out and go a little bit more. If you cover that whole compress with castor oil, when it goes on your hot body, there's nowhere for it to go and it'll start leaking. You don't want that. So we're going to have a break, and when we come back from the break, I'm going to talk a little bit more about castor oil. And by the time we come back, that will have soaked through. So it's 20 past, or no, it's not 20 past, it's just past quarter past. So it's 10:15, and we'll come back at 10:30 in 15 minutes and continue our looking at poultices.